Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen. Welcome to the latest edition of Seconds Out Reflections. We're here every Monday at 4:30 p.m. to talk about the boxing action of the weekend just gone. And no better place to start than the main event of the Matchroom show from Wembley Arena on Saturday night, where we saw the latest British world champion crowned as Lawrence Okolie, in just his 16th professional contest, added the WBO world title at cruiserweight to the belts he's already won at British, Commonwealth and European level. Excellent performance against the former two-time world champion Krzysztof Glowacki. Controlled the tempo and the distance from the start. Excellent use of the jab. Glowacki always wary of that big right hand of Okolie's as well, but it wasn't a hold fest. Very little holding, in fact, in the fight for all those critics who complain about Okolie's style. His footwork, I thought, was especially good. Fast, in and out, adjusted when he needed to, and a trademark, huge right hand to end matters and crown the new world champion by the halfway point. Just didn't put a foot wrong in the whole performance. Has improved significantly under Shane McGregor. We'll talk more about him in a minute because he had a very good night outside of Okolie's win. But for the new champion, much has been made of his background. Started in boxing late, was once obese, working in McDonald's, if you haven't heard. I'm sure you have. And now on top of the world after just 16 pro fights. Not that many amateur fights either, despite going to the Olympics in 2016. And he becomes the first of that GB Olympic class to win a professional world championship. So congratulations to him. Just a great performance. Glowacki could never really make an inroads into Okolie. He did try. He didn't throw a lot of shots, but he put the pressure on, was constantly on the front foot, tried to use his feet as a southpaw, kept that right foot on the outside of his opponent's lead left foot, and tried to sneak in counters when he could, tried to target Okolie's body. But as I keep saying, tried was the operative word, because Okolie, his judgment of the distance especially was excellent, and he was poised and he was always ready with a counter or a pivot to get away when he needed to. And he never allowed Glowacki to get into a rhythm or to get set to unload bigger shots. Just was a step ahead throughout and put an exclamation point on a career best performance with a great finishing shot. And producing your best performance in the fight that matters most against your, on paper, toughest opponent so far, you can't really ask for much more than that. And I'm sure Okolie must be delighted. And in the aftermath, he was talking, as he had, to be fair, before the fight, about unifying in his next fight against the IBF champion, consensus #1 in the division, World Boxing Super Series winner, Briedis of Latvia. That'll be an incredibly interesting fight. I would expect Briedis to put up a much tougher challenge than Glowacki. And a lot of people are saying, well, maybe Lawrence should become more accustomed to world level, get a few defences in first. But you have to admire his ambition. He said before the fight, once he wins the world title, he wants to go straight after Briedis, and he knows that he can't be considered the top man in the cruiserweight division and fulfill his eventual ambitions of moving up to heavyweight until he defeats the man who's seen by most observers as the #1 at the moment, and that's Briedis. So we shall see whether that comes off or not. But yeah, you would expect a much tougher, tighter, and more tactical, perhaps, contest against Briedis. You'd expect him to have more ideas, more of a plan B than Glowacki appeared to have. But we shall see. But for now, big well done to Lawrence Okolie. His story is inspirational for a lot of fighters who start late, who get to a point where it seems like they can't go any further, and then keep breaking through each new ceiling that's put in their way. And I mentioned Shane McGregor. He's improved Okolie significantly, as I said, but also had a good night with his other charges. Anthony Fowler and Chris Billam-Smith both getting good wins, albeit in a different fashion. Billam-Smith had a tough, grueling brawl. I felt he was a clear winner at the end, but a tough, grueling brawl with Vasil Dusa, who came in at relatively short notice. Obviously, they both had limited time to prepare for the other. And I think it's the sort of fight where Billam-Smith, already the Commonwealth champion, fought some of the best domestically and looking to move towards that world scene, or at least the European against Tommy McCarthy, will have learned a great deal. It would have done him the world of good. I know it's a cliche, but having an opponent who poses problems, who comes to win, and who doesn't just go down at the first sign of trouble, and Dusa took some big shots along the way, as did Billum Smith, and having to adjust and adapt and get to grips with an opponent who you're not used to, who there isn't a lot of film on. Although Billum Smith, as he told us last week or the week before, had seen Dusa sparring Briedis previously when he'd been over in camp at the same time. But still, seeing them in the ring in a competitive fight is different from sparring. And Billum Smith got to grips with his opponent eventually, but it was a tough fight, competitive fight, and one that will stand him in good stead going forward. Conversely, Anthony Fowler wiped out world-rated Spaniard Jorge Fortea early on in their contest with one of the better punches he's ever thrown. Kind of came out of nowhere. It seemed like a bit of a tactical fight early on, both kind of waiting for the other to make a move and then counter, but then scored with that big shot. Fowler's a big puncher at super welterweight, particularly at this kind of fringe world level. We'll see if that power stands up when he gets to a higher level. And now, if he can't get that Scott Fitzgerald rematch, he will move on, I think, from domestic level, and they'll look to make the fight with Sergio Garcia for the European. Garcia hasn't really, I don't want to say he hasn't progressed, because he's still getting better as a fighter, but he hasn't really moved up in terms of getting towards a world title shot himself since beating Ted Cheeseman a couple of years ago. So it'll be a good fight for both of them. You would hope that they could add some sort of eliminator tag to it as well. I think Garcia is very highly rated, at least with the WBC. Fowler beat Fortea, who was IBF ranked. I think Fowler will now expect to be rated in at least 2, maybe 3 of the governing bodies in their top 15s. So him against Garcia, European title fight with world level implications, pretty similar to David Avanesian recent fight with Josh Kelly. Like to see that headline a regular Sky Sports show in the near future. Obviously, DAZN outside of the UK and Ireland before people start complaining. But again, Fowler, Billum Smith, who's been with Shane McGregor since the start of his career, but Fowler's moved, obviously, as has Okolie. All look to have improved in the last couple of years, which is credit to Shane McGregor, who must be up there as one of the best British coaches at the moment in the sport. Just before we wrap up, I want to just round up some other results from the weekend. The MTK show on Friday night, very entertaining throughout. Saw Maxi Hughes become the new British lightweight champion with victory over Paul Hyland Jr. Good performance from Maxi Hughes, quite even for the first few rounds, and then he gradually took over. Fast hands, good movement, great boxing IQ. Referee Mark Lyson attracted a bit of criticism for the finish in that Hughes landed a body shot. Hyland turned his back, maybe thinking it was low, or maybe just from the power of the punch, maybe it was just a natural reaction, but either way, turned his back. Lyson told him to box on, which is within the rules, but maybe not the most common sense choice to make in that situation. And Maxi Hughes ran round and threw a punch kind of around the back, if you like, into Hyland's face to end the fight. You can see why people made the criticisms, but, technically, I think it's allowed. But I think in that situation, when someone turns their back from a punch, if you don't think the punch was low, obviously if you think it's low, you'd give them a timeout as the referee. But if you don't think the punch is low, then you should probably stop the fight. If they turn their back from a legal punch, I've seen it happen before, the referee should normally stop the fight. But we are where we are, and it didn't change the result. There's no way Hyland was coming back from what had become a bit of a beating by that point from Maxi Hughes. And congratulations to him. He's had an incredible year, last 12 months. Obviously beat John O'Carroll in that upset, then Kozochikov, and now came in probably as the favourite this time around, but beat Hyland Jr., got the job done. And now hopefully a rematch for him with Liam Walsh, who was originally mandated to fight for this title against James Tennyson. And we hope they can get it on. But if not, if Maxi Hughes wants to vacate and keep moving up those WBC rankings after the form he's had and the sacrifices he's made previously, who could blame him? Also on that show, we saw a performance every bit as punch perfect as Okolie's, just in a much shorter time frame, from Lee McGregor, who ripped the European bantamweight title from Frenchman Karim Guerfi. Body shots did the damage. But McGregor's overall poise and shot selection was excellent. His defense as he attacked as well, kind of picking his shots, moving his head out of the way of the follow-ups, and then once again placing his own punches with precision. Just excellent performance. Got rid of Guerfi in that first round, and the finishing shot, the left hook to the head, great punch. And it was all brought about by the body shots, because after feeling that power early on, Guerfi got into his crouch, tucked his elbows in, but he left himself open to the side and the top of the head, and so it proved. We also saw a bit of a breakout performance in the US from Vergil Ortiz Jr. at welterweight in a very exciting fight with Maurice Hooker, won by stoppage, and a lot of people are now touting him. Similar to Okolie, who already after a career best win wants the best in his division. Vergil Ortiz Jr. now wants Terence Crawford, a fight that he was calling for previous to beating Hooker, but now it comes with a bit more credibility. And while I'm not sure he's got the beating of Crawford at this stage of this relative stages of their careers, I think it has to be admired, just as it is with Okolie, when these younger, fresher guys are calling out the very best so early on. And let's hope that can get made as well, because Crawford is short of world-class dance partners that people are going to get excited about. Ortiz Jr. certainly fits that bill. So I guess what I want to know from you guys is, what was your highlight of the weekend? Whose was the best performance? You know, McGregor, Okolie, Ortiz Jr., all up there. Or maybe you'll pick a wild card, someone I'm not mentioning. But let me know what you thought. And what do you make of Ortiz targeting Crawford and Okolie targeting Briedis? Are they ready for that level of challenge? Should they take some kind of consolidating fights first to establish themselves as reliable, consistent world-level performers in their division before going for the number one? And that's if you consider Crawford the number one, of course, with Errol Spence in the same division. I'll be back on Thursday for Flex Expectations, 4:30 p.m, and next week, Monday, for the next reflections at the same time. As always, really appreciate you guys watching. Look forward to reading your comments, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.